Hello, welcome to the Talking Pictures Uneasy Laughs discussion. I'd like to thank AFTRS for this event, and we invite you to post your thoughts during the discussion, hashtag MIFF 2015 TP. It's not toilet paper, I'm assured. My name is Natalie Bailey, and I'll be moderating. Please welcome the panel. We've got comedian, writer, and star of Please Like Me, Josh Thomas.
Hi.
Director and screenwriter Sebastián Silva, whose new film Nasty Baby, which screens as part of the festival with his retrospective work to date. Playwright. Oh no, wrong. You went in a different order. I was expecting. So we also have Adam Elliot, whose film Ernie Biscuit is showing in the film. Is a choreographer. Has spoken. It's up now. And playwright Lally Katz, whose first film that she's written and stars in, Stories I Want to Tell You in Person, is also screened at the festival.
Oh. Fuck yeah, Lally Katz! Fuck yeah!
Okay, so the question that has been posed to the panel, sometimes the funniest comedy derives from the most fantastical, awkward and tragic situations, humour which violates our moral expectations, oversteps boundaries or finds light in the darkest corners. How is it that the juxtaposition of these opposing forces results in humour? So, my first question to the panel is there a film or a TV show or something that you think perfectly combines the dark and the light, so juxtaposes the forces of humour and tragedy?
Actually, I have one, Happiness, which I know we talked about earlier. The film Happiness was the first film I ever watched where I was completely shocked, and it takes a lot to shock me, and I really, wasn't aware of the actor Philip Seymour Hoffman, and I'd never seen a Todd Solondz film, and never seen a feature film about that touches on pedophilia, and by the end of it I was, wow, this is one of my top 3. Should I go and have therapy? Is this a problem? But Happiness for me was one of the tops. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about probably for me, Twin Peaks that I watched. I remember I was a teenager. I was about 13, and I would stay up late and watch Twin Peaks when it was on TV, and I'd be 1 minute laughing, and then suddenly like Killer Bob would be kind of creeping up on a bed, and I'd be crying, and my mother would come in and say, turn it off if it upsets you that much. I go, no, I love it. But, and I think, that kind of like, that just seemed like life to me, like hopefully not real life, but that there's so much like kind of horrifying things, but then out of them comes this like Laura Palmer theme song.
I find I've been very amused by Donald Trump videos on YouTube. It's like kind of like only tragic, but I find that very amusing. And then there's one video that had made I've shown in panels before just because I find it very funny. It's really vulgar, but it's an 80-year-old lady that decided to celebrate her birthday by skydiving, and she invites her friends over, and then she jumps, and then she doesn't want to jump, right? Like she's like on the door of the plane, like struggling, and she's like jumping tandem, right, with somebody attached to her body. Yeah. So the guy's like kind of like forcing her out of the plane, and she pushes her out, and then they're falling, and then she kind of detaches from the parachute. Exactly. So it's very funny and amusing, but she survives. She survives, but it's really like every time I watch it, I cry laughing.
How many times? How many times do you think you've watched it?
It's called like, I watch it. I don't know, like total, like really, like realistically, like 12 times maybe. It's short, and it has like the most random like rock music, and it's called like Old Lady Freaks Out or something. Jumping the parachute old lady. Yeah, check it out. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's fun.
Do you know a movie I quite like is the first Kick-Ass, right? Have you not seen it? It's lowbrow, right? It's not for you people. But it's like an action movie, but it's like really quite funny. There's like a child and she says cunt. It's very funny. And I quite like it because it's like really properly violent, and often you're laughing. But I quite like it because like
I think some people would find that sort of like it sort of points out how just offensive how much like violence we watch is. Do you know what I mean? Like by kind of making it funny, but it's actually just the same standard as any other kind of action movie. It sort of is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And to me, it's an interesting thing of what you find successful. Like Happiness somehow managed to do it, but I don't know, there must have been people out there who found it offensive. You know, the people who'd been affected by pedophilia or whatever, they must have found it offensive. And it's a really interesting thing that for most of us, we can accept and find some wonderful moments of humour in this film. And there's so many characters that are so deeply depressed, and it touches us in such a way because we see parts of ourselves in some of these characters. We connect in some of these characters. And so, as you said, you kind of go, do I need a therapist? Because this is a movie I've somehow connected and can laugh at. Yet I'm not that person. I'm not that person. But I can see where we relate to each other. But there are films. I remember seeing Trainspotting years ago, and it was a fantastic film. But I'd grown up in a culture where drug abuse and heroin had touched a lot of my friends, and there'd been deaths and things. And at the time, I thought this glamorizes. Hold on, I'm laughing at heroin addicts here. And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, I'm laughing, but I'm uncomfortable. And with distance now, I probably wouldn't give a shit, I will say. It's just time has changed, and I can now laugh at these things. But I pose to you also, what film has crossed the line too far for you, where you think, is there anything you've gone, oh no, that's not funny. That person's made a comedy out of something that is not funny. Whether it be on the internet, film, TV.
I mean, TV does it all the time in just sort of like vaguely, just gently offensive ways, but they're never like pretending they're black comedy. They're just dickheads.
Yeah.
They're just like Sam Newman or someone just being really mean. They're being like when Hey Hey at Saturday came back and they're all just like awful, misogynistic, disgusting people, but they don't think that, like, they would look at a joke about suicide and be like, you're being so offensive, but not give a shit that they're like actually just the worst people in the world, Like that's whenever we talk about like black comedy, like it's usually actually incredibly socially responsible, and it's like talking about an issue in a way that's actually really helpful, which is sort of like, obviously, like anyone getting offended by that is a dick. They're just not thinking. The stuff that's offensive is like,
they're not trying to make a point in any way. They're just trying to get a laugh, a cheap laugh in a sense.
Just Sam Newman on the street talking to people who like probably just shouldn't be talking on television. And he's like really rich and they have got no money, and he's using them to sell Coke. Like Coca-Cola, not the drug. Like,
It's a bit like, nudity, because my films are plasticine.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know 2 films ago I had a naked Jewish atheist man with Asperger's syndrome standing on a desert island with his willy out.
Yes.
And that offended people.
Oh, really?
And I always remember that.
The dick. You're saying the dick offended people, not
we had to fuzz it out too, with like a little.
Of all the things.
And it was a wide shot. It was in the distance, But the thing was, I always remember. I don't know if it's Jack Nicholson. Everyone quotes Jack Nicholson, but he said, "Why is it in a Hollywood film you're allowed to show a woman's nipple and cut it off with a sword, but you can't show the woman's nipple?" So there's all these ridiculous double standards about what is. I mean, I find the Footy Show the most offensive show on television. And I don't want to sound like I loathe sport, but I do loathe sport. But but I just find there's all sorts of double standards when it comes to what is considered, politically correct or what. I mean, I don't know. For me, comedy and tragedy, I always go back to that. Again, I don't know if it's Woody Allen who said this, is that like tragedy is when I get a paper cut. Comedy is when I get a... No, tragedy is when I get a paper cut. Comedy is when you walk into an open sewer and die. And I always thought, well, is that comedy tragedy? I don't know. Yes. Mel Brooks, there we go. Yes, it wasn't Woody Allen.
Yeah, I am very rarely offended by anything that, like Josh was saying, that's sort of made with a good heart. But the black comedies that I just cannot bear are the ones that are sort of horror films. And it's just because I can't bear black comedy that is physical black comedy. Like,
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid watching an old episode of The Young Ones, and so everyone was always saying, The Young Ones is so funny. And then they were digging with a shovel and somebody's head got chopped off, and I was like, that is not funny. It's horrific. But so I'm just really like stuff like Evil Dead or Scream. To me, that is, I just can never understand how can that be funny. But I mean, I've got no problem with them. I just can't watch them.
It's violence that.
It makes me feel sick. But
Yeah. And Sebastian, do you have anything that you think pushes it too
like
far?
I've gotten like I find offensive or not offensive, but really bad taste and like extremely unfunny to me. It's like, for instance, like Ricky Gervais, like how do you
Yes.
and Larry David. I really like a lot of their comedy, but I really dislike when they sort of like just to like break the barriers of like what's politically correct and politically incorrect. Like they bring into their sketches like handicapped people or blind people or black people and make fun of them, or gay people and make fun of them. Like, I feel that it's kind of old, and even though it's like they're making a point of like breaking the politically correct, I find it really bad taste and like very cheap comedy.
Yeah.
I think that's what I find it a little offensive, and also like stand-up comedians, which I usually find really unfunny. I just find that the idea of like going on a stage and be like, I'll be funny for an hour, it just takes all the comedy out of everything. Like I cannot.
It's disgusting. It is disgusting.
Disturbing.
I find it like extremely unfunny.
Those dogs.
Or are you a stand-up comedian?
Oh my God, not anymore.
Sorry. Yeah, no, but
No, I quit. Don't worry, I quit it. It's fine.
Fair play.
I hate them. That's why they're.
But he's
they're
a wonderful
dogs.
writer.
Right. No, maybe, I mean, like, I laugh with stand-up comedians. I love stand-up comedians.
No, I quit
Stand-up
it.
comedians are my
No,
He's sitting. It's okay. He's
They're
sitting now.
pigs.
It's fine.
They're disgusting.
no,
eating
but like same, like Louis C.K. or like guys that I find funny, like when they start talking about people with AIDS and like I just like I imagine people with AIDS at home and like how could they don't care, like, because it is definitely not funny for them. There's no way it's funny for them. I find that lack of compassion a little bit of bad taste.
It's an interesting one, and something I was thinking about with The Thick of It, that we found a line of what you could. Malcolm would say some incredibly offensive things, but sometimes he would say things to do with they'd pick on someone with diabetes. You know what I mean? And for some reason, you'd get away with that. And it's an interesting thing that you wouldn't go as far as AIDS. Right. He probably did. But the ones that you kind of go, oh, actually, if you find something that we don't find offensive, that if you can make a joke out of something that's okay, you know, there's enough people with diabetes and it's not this epidemic that it still kills people. That's the interesting thing about it. The line is it still kills people.
And it's a fine line, I guess, too, about whether you're laughing at the people, at people's attitudes about it, or if you're laughing at the person who has whatever it is. Like, and I think that makes a difference.
I think the three guys you said are really interesting, Ricky and Larry and who was the other one?
Ricky.
Louis. Because I've seen them all do things about like offensive things that you've just thought like that was brilliant. You really made an interesting point. It's been really like hilarious and fun. And then often I think they're just a bit sloppy, like just in like they're just trying to create content all the time, and they sort of, because they've done these other things that are great. Like Louis C.K. has that famous scene about the word faggot, which like a lot of it's quite offensive, but you kind of get to the end of it and it's on our team. It's pro faggot, but like for a few minutes there, you would be probably a bit angry. And then other times, I just think they just are churning out minutes of content and just getting a bit sloppy.
Which is a difficult thing in comedy, because actually it's one of the areas where you have to be fresh so often. In drama, you can repeat emotions, scenarios to a degree, as long as the characters are different and all these things. Comedy has to go through so much material in some ways. It has to just churn through so much that's where you start digging into areas that where you are testing the line, I think.
Well, you just end up putting a lot of junk in things because you have to fill the time.
But you also, it's a writer's job to push the boundaries too, and I think that's what comedy, you know, when you laugh, supposedly that's a relief too.
Yeah.
Actually, I just thought another one that I don't, jokes about dwarfs and midgets. I just find that's, for me, has never ever been funny and never will be. But you know, unless there's some irony in there, and you just touched on irony as well. But yeah, look, I don't know. I just find that. It's like 9/11 after 9/11 happened. When were we allowed to tell the first 9/11 joke? Yeah. And actually, I've never heard a funny 9/11 joke. I'm sure there are some, but it's like, well, are there some subjects that are just you can never touch on? I don't know.
I mean,
Well, with time, yes, there is. It seems to be, and it's because it's when everyone, it's a majority, because otherwise comedy would never exist. Because there's nothing you could touch. There's absolutely nothing, because one person out there is going to be offended by something you say.
Yeah, and I feel like those three were like they've made me angry lots of times. Like the times that I've just thought, oh, you're just being a shit.
Right.
You're just being an entitled shit, and you're out of touch, and you've got everything you could ever need, and you're making fun of people that are worse off than you. But for all the times that they've done that, I don't want to like get annoyed at them because they've done other great things, and you want them to continue to like take risks.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you create like a situation where everyone is just really boring.
It just feels like the risk taking things that are offensive. It feels like such an easy way to explore, because like, I mean, if you think of like real funny people, like, I don't know, Andy Kaufman, like I found him extremely hilarious and inventive, and like he created comedy from such a like different perspective. It's so creative and challenging. Like I feel somebody laughing at AIDS or like hunger or like black people being shot in the streets. It's like, it's so easy because it's like, so the controversy, it's right there. I mean, like, there's really not a, so I find that data just like very tactless, like more, I'm not offended, of course.
I think it just depends. For me, it just depends on whether they're laughing with the AIDS or against. I don't know how you can laugh with AIDS. It's a very strong example. I don't want to sit here and defend AIDS comedy, but probably don't.
Be a headline. Josh
fine.
Thomas defends AIDS comedy.
They don't need any more pain. But yeah, I feel like most of the time they're trying, like, you want to be able to talk about these things that people are scared of and make people sad and then are causing people pain. Like comedy, you want it to be able to alleviate pain when that's what's great about it. And so if you say, oh, you can't talk about things like AIDS or cancer or disability or oppression, then it sort of makes comedy a bit weak. It's just sometimes people are either lazy or they just miss the mark, or they're not communicating what they think they're communicating, which is the times that those three have infuriated me.
Because it is an interesting thing where you have to find this is the purpose of black comedy that's on the right side of it, is to make us laugh at it and then think about it in a way. So there are times when you go, oh God, I just laughed at something, which is, should I have laughed at that? Was that wrong of me to laugh at that? Should I find that funny?
One of the worst gigs I've ever done was at the Opera House, right? And I started doing this routine. I was doing it in my like 1 hour show, but I was doing it in 6 minutes. And it was about me accidentally on this like long hike fantasizing about my boyfriend getting cancer and fantasizing like at how good a job I was doing at looking after my boyfriend, right? Like how like I was just such a fantasy hero looking after his imaginary cancer. And it just went on for 6 minutes with me just really like bragging about that. And I said the word cancer and they all stopped making any noise apart from one person at the back of the room that went, oh, the Opera House has like famously incredible acoustics, right? Like the silence there is thick. But I don't think, like, and afterwards, I tweeted about it and people were like, you shouldn't make fun of cancer. Like my mum died of cancer and it was bad. And it's like, well, I mean, you don't own cancer, right? Like we've all been touched by cancer. And like, of course, I think cancer is a really shit, sad thing, but you want to be able to like,
find light.
And to me, that sounds like you were making fun of yourself, not of cancer. You were making fun of this of this fantasy you were having and sort of laughing at yourself, and with something that probably a lot of people have had similar sort of fantasies about and stuff. But then once it goes out into the air, everyone goes, "Oh no, I have to pretend that I've never done that, or I have to be polite about it."
Or they just think this is not funny. And they were probably right. I mean, I was probably shit, but
I think empathy has a lot to do with it too. If it's something that you can relate to, then it's okay. So, I mean, in theory, any subject there shouldn't be anything off limits between.
Agree.
It's
Agree.
just to make it hard when you're a straight, rich white guy. It does make
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
hard. I do often just think, shut up.
It's funny though, because I was thinking about that. I was thinking all those examples are straight, rich, white guys, and it's like, well, does that mean that they have a responsibility to kind of shake things up for other people, or does it mean that it's kind of unfair that they get to have all the territory, which isn't? And I feel mixed about it, because part of me, I saw this Louis C.K. episode the other day, which I don't want to be a spoiler, but where he gets beat up by a woman in the street, and then his girlfriend, puts makeup on him, and then they have sex, and she's like the man and he's like the woman, and then she says, I just want to be friends. And I thought, that is my life. And I thought, now I understand what it's like for me from having seen this Louis C.K. thing. And I thought, but is he allowed to explain to me what it's like to be a woman? I thought, well, I guess maybe he's explaining. I thought, well, maybe he's explaining to men who don't understand. But I don't know. It's funny though. I feel kind of on the net about it.
There's a really interesting. There was an interesting case a few years back with a friend of mine who was doing his PhD, and he was looking a lot at disability and comedy and disability. And he called his, I don't know if anyone recalls this, it caused a stir in Brisbane. Anything causes a stir in Brisbane. But it was, his topic for his PhD was laughing at the disabled. And that straight away just made people angry. And he was trying to test where this line was of when can we, he was involving people with disability. And he wanted to know, because it was one of those areas that you just can't go near. But he wanted to know, if you're involving people with disability who are funny, when do they get to own the comedy and the funny things and their disability? When do they get to take ownership of it? So that's actually what he was looking at. And I think that's an interesting thing about when do you get to take ownership of what you've experienced, and it's as you said about empathy and what people can laugh with you. So he says laughing at the disabled, but it's actually about them empowering themselves to find that they can.
Yeah, of course they're allowed to make jokes, and there's so much tension with people that are disabled where you don't want to be like patronizing them, but also like you don't want to. I'm a stand-up comedian. Stand-up comedians have so many stories about accidentally yelling at someone that they didn't realize was disabled at the time, right? Because it's dark. When I was like 18, my like comeback heckle was I would just really like violently threaten to bash people up, and it was funny because I was like tiny and very camp, and obviously I couldn't, but I didn't realize the person I was talking to just had like some sort of involuntary kind of thing, I don't know what, but they were making lots of involuntary sort of groans, and then I just started threatening to like bash them up, right? I was like, I'll fucking wreck you, you pig, why are you trying to ruin my, you think I won't come down? Anyway, it was like an hour into the show, and like the person had been doing it the whole time to other comedians, and I just hadn't paid attention. So it's pretty bad, right? But then when you're in that situation, I sort of don't want to turn around to that person and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I said that to you because you're disabled. I'm like I don't want to hurt your feelings, but also it's like, no, we're at a comedy night. You're just a person. Fuck you. But what do you do?
Yeah.
But I think probably there's no reason ever to bring up the disabled in comedy unless you are disabled, ever.
Well, I think too.
I think a disabled person making disabled comedy is even worse, right? It sounds really tragic. Like there's like somebody with AIDS making jokes about AIDS, that would be terrible.
But that's the whole thing about.
That would be terrifying.
Actually, no, I sort of from a cartoonist animation perspective, there's years ago a cartoonist, John Callahan, who's an alcoholic paraplegic, and he started to do all these very wobbly cartoons, very naive looking, and he started to do really full-on jokes about the disabled, and he was getting all this hate mail, and no one knew that actually he was a paraplegic. So it depends on who actually the joke is coming from as well, and in what context. And once they found out, oh, okay, you're a paraplegic, oh, well, that's okay then. You're allowed to make jokes about other paraplegics. So I think too with disability is that, I get accused all the time of, oh, Adam, you make films about the disabled. And I said, no, I don't. I actually make films about imperfection, and I make films about myself, and I make films about people who never get films made about them.
Exactly. Yeah,
so
that's what's
actually,
interesting
I'm
when you
just trying
avoid
to
it.
tell stories about people, and I'm trying to get the audience to put themselves in my character's shoes. So by the end of the film, you know what it's like to have Tourette syndrome or Asperger's, or it's not actually about laughing at these people. It's laughing with these people and empathising. And by the end, hopefully, you'll have learned something, laughed and cried at the same time.
Because that is it. It's like if you keep avoiding, when do stories get told, and when can they be empowered by comedy? Does it always have to be tragedy? So it's an interesting thing, as you said, and I've noticed in your work that you have often got people with hearing impairment and I think
but there's
blind
stories
woman.
that everyone has the right to tell their story, and so my stories are biographies. So I have my films are based on my friends who are deaf or blind or who have Tourette's, my pen pal who has Asperger's, so they have the right to be turned into a plasticine film just as much as anyone else has.
I don't want to exclude them just because they're...
No, of course not, Anyway.
I personally don't feel like I would be able to do a good job of it. But
it's
people,
tough.
it's your own
It's tough
personal
because
story,
you do offend people eventually. And I know with Mary and Max, which deals with Asperger's syndrome, I had probably 1,000 wonderful emails from people in the Asperger's community who identified with the film and said, "Finally, a film about Asperger's in plasticine."
They've been waiting.
But then and then hate mail. People were like, "You faggot, gay," all these sort of really hang on, did you understand? Did you watch the film to the end? But that's good because you don't want indifference, you don't want apathy. You just want actually some engagement.
And maybe that's the point. Is that it's like you guys were saying, is when it's done properly and not cheaply and messily, and it actually you actually kind of live or get an experience of a person. Or you can kind of tell the truth, or tell a kind of give sort of life to the comedy rather than it being kind of just to shock or prove a point or something.
If it's authentic too, and I know with Josh's series, what I love about your series is actually it rings true. It's believable. These are jokes, but actually there's a heart and soul to all this, and it's actually quite nourishing by the end. You've laughed, but. Is your series a comedy with tragedy in it, or is it a series of tragedy with comedy in it? That's the thing. And I think comedy and tragedy, it's the balance between the two, because no one's life is completely happy or completely sad. There are moments of both, and really it's about authenticity, and whether it's a blobby plasticine film or a film based on your own life, or a
porn film.
or a film that's 100% the person on screen. It's it's authenticity, I think, at the end of the day. I don't know.
And Josh, have you ever had anyone offended at anything that...
Not that many people watch my show.
Yes.
We don't have a big enough audience to reach. No. No. They got... junk, people, really extreme people, but not anyone reasonable. No, my show's got a lot of suicide and bipolar and lots of stuff like that, and that's what they're talking about. But we never make fun of, anytime we have comedy that's around suicide, it's not about, we're never making fun of suicide, it's always people trying to navigate through a situation that's very difficult and trying their best and not doing that well. Yeah. That's what you try and do. The source of the comedy is never, thinking back on my show, occasionally, but mostly never about suicide. It's about the characters trying to deal with difficult situations.
I saw one clip which had, which is interesting because it actually questioned the line and whether you'd crossed it, where you'd called you had met this boy under a table. And he said he was mental or had been into a mental thing. You said you're not that mental, but then later you sledged him a little bit during a ping pong match about him being an orphan as well. Yeah. And people were really upset with you at the party.
For yelling that he was an orphan.
Yeah.
But he had joked about it earlier. but they didn't know that I had permission.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But the fact that he's an orphan is sort of irrelevant to that. It's just
Yeah.
me getting permission to do something and nobody else knows about it, and then I embarrass myself.
Absolutely. Is this like? Do you base a lot of stuff on your awkward situations in life, or do you just come up with them? What's your? Have you had this ping pong incident?
No, I've never yelled at somebody, you don't have any parents, you idiot. That's never come up. I definitely would. If I had a friend who didn't have parents and he was teasing me he teased me first about my mum.
He teased you first, yeah.
And then I said, definitely I would, my friend, I would definitely make fun of my friends if they're going through a difficult time. Because, why should I be bored? Just because you're having a hard time. I don't know. Do you know what I quite, well, I really like Love Actually, right? I know. The MIFF and Love Actually, whatever. But there's this scene that I really like that really echoes me where she's talking to this guy and she said, I've got to go. And there's this awkward pause. She was like, it doesn't mean I'm not terribly sorry that your wife just died. And it's like this little joke and he does a little smile. And it's like, that's like this nice warm thing you can do for somebody to just sort of, when everyone else is putting this huge weight on you in a difficult situation, you want to be able to come in and just go like, hey, actually you're still normal and the world is still normal. You're just having a shit time. And that's what we try and do with that show. No one's ever complained.
Sebastian, you've had anyone complain about, have you crossed a line as in someone's eyes?
No, not yet. But I do really enjoy life. I mean, tragedy makes me laugh a lot. There is, I made a show that is shown here. It's called The Boring Life of Jacqueline, and it's about a aspiring actress, boring life, and she lives in a beige studio apartment with shitty furniture, and she's tweeting for herself all day, and she's defriended on Facebook, and she's over masturbating and eating sugary cereal all day, and like that has been my life. And that is like a lot of people's life. I feel that now I'm writing a show that it's really not comedy, but I find it really funny just because it's so easy to identify. It's called All the Lonely People, and it's about basically people trying to find love or some kind of connection through online stuff, phones, Tinder, all of that stuff. Like I find Tinder to be hilarious, and the longing of people, and like how people are hoping to find their significant other on an application, swiping right and left, like, and it is really tragic. Seriously, to see somebody on a subway like going like, I love you, no, I love, and then they text each other and then they delete each other. It's like the biggest tragedy, but then it's funny, yeah. I don't think people will get offended or like send hate email for that because they'll be terrified to be exposed as one of those pathetic people. But I am one of them, so I usually laugh at my pathetic self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of your stories, a lot of your films are about you in some way, or some of them.
Pretty much,
not.
yeah. I've done a couple of films that are pretty autobiographical. I take elements. I use them as narrative elements. Like Nasty Baby, it's my apartment, it's my cat. The character, he's a homosexual that has a cat named Sula, and then I'm a homosexual that has a cat named Sula. So it is. I'm using a lot of. I'm using a lot of my stuff, but then it's not really me. Yeah. I'm just using it as narrative elements.
Do you feel like...
I feel very detached from it.
Do you? So you don't feel like you've exposed too much of yourself, or at any point?
Not yet. No, not really.
Not yet. Yeah.
Not yet. I mean, With The Boring Life of Jacqueline, I really feel that I am Jacqueline.
Oh, wow.
Like that's the one that I felt that more exposed, but it's in disguise because it's a blonde girl.
Yeah. And what about friends of yours? Have you ever felt like you've...
characters? The Boring Life of Jacqueline, yes.
Yeah.
The girl that plays The Boring Life of Jacqueline, her name is Jacqueline, and she is an aspiring actress that lives in a beige apartment. So she asked me if she could change the name to Margaret, and I'm like, I'll think about it. Like for the show, The Boring Life of Margaret, and I'm like, for some reason I felt that it didn't work as well. I'm like, I think Boring and Jacqueline works better than Margaret.
No, you're right.
Right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm sorry, it's gonna have to be your name. She's like, yeah, sure.
Anything to become an actress in something.
So that was, I think I exploited her. I exploited
Yeah.
her tragic side, but
Yeah.
it was a collaboration. But it got pretty intimate, yeah.
And were there times when you were like, I want to push this further, and she was, no, I can't go there?
Yeah, once. So she finds an actor, Michael Cera. She finds him on Chat Roulette. I don't know if you Chat Roulette.
Yep.
It's like a weird website. Are people familiar with Chat Roulette?
I've heard of it.
Okay, yeah. So
Someone that doesn't like these things, you really spend a lot of time,
Chatting.
swiping.
Swiping.
So she finds him and she starts fantasizing with this creature, right? And then she's in bed daydreaming about him, and then she's dreaming, but we don't know. And then Michael Cera comes into the room, and she's in bed, and then I wanted her to pee herself, like when she saw Michael Cera, like she would pee herself. So I panned down to her vagina and waited for her to pee. And I asked her if she could like pee live, and that was like pretty humiliating for her because there were like 12 people around her waiting for her to pee. Everybody was staring at her vagina, and she's like just like kind of trying to push, and like it didn't work. I think that was like the most humiliation she went through on the show.
Yeah.
But it wasn't
Made her
that
pee
bad.
herself?
I think she just got pee.
Pee.
Yeah, pee. Oh, yeah, pee.
I thought you were saying be yourself, so I thought the story was you saying until you are good at acting,
urinate
I will not
herself.
take the camera away from your
Urinate.
vagina. I was like, Jesus Christ!
I was trying to make that. How does a vagina be
Like Larry-
itself? I've never had
Like Larry
No,
David
yeah,
looked
it's
like
urine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's the microphone.
That's why I do animation.
Yeah. No exposing.
people.
I'm
And
seizing
Lally,
up.
you've had, so in your film, you had, if anyone's seen it yet, very, 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 very good. But there's a moment when you'd made a promise to yourself, or to something, that you would never put love in front of, before your work. But you do fall in love with, I quote, the full Jew, which then that person is a real person in your life.
Uh-huh.
So how have people been, and there's probably other people maybe in that film, like your neighbour and everything that you talk about, that have been exposed,
Yeah.
and they're part of these dark comedies. How do they feel?
They feel mixed. When I was younger, I used to sort of make up characters, but then I've gone onto a new thing, which was, oh no, I don't have to do that. I can meet people, hang out with them all the time, learn the way they talk, learn how their heart works, and what they're sort of, I guess, learn their personalities, and then write them instead. The first person I really did that with was my Hungarian neighbor Anna, and she was originally. Well, I tell her because I have two rules about it, and one is that only do it about people I love, because then at least you're not going to deliberately do a job on them, and I think when you write, you sort of have to write, for me anyway, you have to write from your heart, and I couldn't write from my heart about somebody who I didn't love. And so so originally I would tell her all along, I kept saying, I'm writing about you, Anushka, which I'm politically incorrect that it's in her accent, but that I speak to her, but and she would be like, yeah. But she never really understood, I don't think, until she came and saw the original stage show at Belvoir Theatre. And at first, what I find with people is when they first see it, well, first of all, she sort of like, there were bits where she would kind of be like, yeah, very good, Anna, very good. And then there were bits where she'd be like, lying, Anna, lying. And like for bits that I'd made up. And afterwards, she stood up and she said, the people should to know who Anna is. And like, but then she was really happy on the day. And then a week later, she wouldn't answer my calls. And finally I went over and she said, you've shamed me, because I'd made up this bit that she had sex out of marriage. And then that was the only bit that she was furious about. But then with her, it sort of depends. Like sometimes if her doctor sees the play and likes it, then she's proud of it. But if somebody sees it and kind of goes, if someone doesn't like it, then she's humiliated. But So people it sort of depends. And like
on the response from the audience.
It depends on the response of the audience. And what I've found is people are usually quite happy on the night, and then they go away and start thinking and start getting angry and funny about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about, so for you, Adam, you're doing it about people that you know. All of them are?
Yes.
Yeah. So have any of them been upset with you, or are they all happy to be represented?
Well, my family are in all of my films, and I never let them read the scripts until their opening night. And my feature film, Mary Max, which was open Sundance, my parents flew over for the premiere. And my mum and dad were sitting down the front, sitting next to Robert Redford, and it was all very glamorous. And they knew they were in there somewhere. And about 2/3 of the way through the film, my father gets killed by a tidal wave. And I remember sitting on, watching my dad's reaction, and in Harvey Crumpet, my mother has a brain clot and dies in that one. So, but it's always. I say, it's just plasticine. It doesn't matter. They're just their names are the same, but they never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And and the best stories come from reality. And a bit like Lally, I can't just sit in front of a computer screen and come up with characters. I have to be like a sponge and look around the people around me, and I eavesdrop, and I have notebooks. I'm always writing down things I hear and see, things that are funny, tragic, poignant, whatever. And they all go in, and you hope you're not going to offend anybody, but you know that there is somebody. You can't please all of the people all of the time. And you know that, as Lally said, as long as it's coming from a good place, you love the people you're telling these stories about, and you're actually telling a positive story. You're not, there are so many video games that I find far more offensive and gratuitous and negative than
killing your own parents.
And it's like, yes, it's like, why, why do we get examined so much? We're just trying to tell, we actually try, we're not trying to save lives. Well, maybe we do save lives, but, we have good intentions. We're really not trying to make films or series or theatre to upset anyone. We actually want to make you laugh, make you cry, and leave the cinema feeling a bit nourished, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, sounds wanky, doesn't it?
No, but it's good. And you, yourself, Josh? Have you had, anyone that you've represented in your comedy?
My parents. So I've got, the parents in my show. My mum's attempted suicide. And it was the scene in this show is, pretty much exactly the same as in our real life. My sister came to set that day. It was a mistake. But I'm surprised you guys, they don't see it, because we've got, we're obsessed with not being sued. So my parents have the highest level of script notes. Script notes. They're higher above the network, so they have to sign off on it for us to film it.
Amazing.
But then, when they watch season 1, because the show's not for them. My dad likes 2.5 Men, so that's that's the biggest thing. And they're it had just been moved from ABC 1 to ABC 2, and they were sitting in my living room, and they're sort of thinking, how has he betrayed me? But they're also thinking, is he going to be able to afford to keep us somewhere old? So there's this split kind of tension for them. But then it got very good reviews, and now they love it. Now they're really on board. And
how is the people in their community? Did they know the show, and do your parents promote it, I suppose, to people?
The big thing is you're talking about her saying sex out of marriage. That's where you get sued, right? Because when you say something that's not true, and you're saying it's that person, and that's defamation. And it's also the reason why you get sued is because it's also the point where it's actually quite bad. That's the stuff that I made up about my parents is the stuff that potentially they're going to be upset about, and that's why they have approval, ethically and legally. I can't remember what your question was. My mum, the way I sold it to my mum, quite sincerely, was, I know about this, I think it's a really good thing to talk about. When it happened in our family, when you attempted suicide, you were a bit taken aback by it. I was taken aback by it. We'd never seen a story like this on television. Watching things on television gives you good practice at sort of knowing kind of what to expect or something like that. And I'm in a position to be able to write this better than most people, so that's why I want to do it, sign the contract. Thank you. she agrees with that now that it's been on air. So like her psychiatrist is like a big fan, and she was like, this is really like a really good depiction of what goes on, and so now she really like feels quite sort of self-righteous about it, which I'm very happy about.
That seems great, and that is a perfect example of where black comedy
Because she was always like,
works beautifully.
I don't understand why you think this is funny. Like, how could this be funny? And it was like, and I was like, I actually don't think it's funny. And then actually it won't be funny. Like those bits of the show, they won't be funny. The comedy will come from like the situations around that. And that was really hard for her to understand why I thought. We had like quite a few difficult conversations where she was like, why do you think my suicide attempt is funny before she read the scripts?
Yeah.
But also she's reading scripts, she doesn't really know like how to read them. So it's a bit like it's trying to talk her through it and get her there. But now she's thrilled.
Yeah, and the awkwardness of you I didn't see the original one, but the awkwardness of you having to deal with that situation and having to feel
it's good
like
fun.
Yeah. Good fun.
Yeah, it's nice, you know. But there's a lot of trust. They had to build a lot of trust in me, and I really could have fucked it up. Because like the biggest risk wasn't I was always good intentions, but there was just a risk that I'm not very talented. So those good intentions come across as me being a douchebag and just humiliating my family. So
Lucky that wasn't true, though.
That's high stakes. Yeah.
But it is, and I'm sure everyone feels that there's a story in them that they'd love to tell that's about someone or something very close to them, but you can't do it yet. And I'm sure everyone has that, and it's hard. You know, I have a situation in my family where I'd want to tell the story, but I can't do it yet. Until someone passes on, I will not tell that story.
You gotta take the risk, though. I feel that the risk is, it's kind of everything. With my film, The Maid, it's about a maid that was working at my parents' house where I lived for 19 years, and she had been working there forever, like for over 20 years. And I made a movie about her life, and it was quite tragic. It has comedy, but it's like a depiction of her life that I was really scared for her to see it and react very poorly, because it was like a virginal woman that was somehow captive in a house of like upper middle class people that didn't like share with her as much as she would and like as she would like, and it was like a pretty sad depiction of her life, right? But I did it really with the best intentions, and I was shooting the movie while she was on vacation, but I shot it at my parents' house. Wow. So, but she knew that I was doing this movie called The Maid, which is her, right? And we use her room, her sheets, her family pictures, and I asked for permission, right? And she's like, yeah, dude. And then when the movie was done, it has like, luckily it has like a kind of like a hopeful ending. It's not full redemption for her, but it's a hopeful ending, but it was almost inviting her to leave, right? And she was the first one to watch it ever. You know, like I finished the movie and I'm like, I want to show you this film I made about you. And then and I didn't get along with her really. Like I had been in the States for 10 years, so I was not really close to her. And I was never really that close to her. But I was showing this sort of like family situation, that what is it to have a live-in maid? It's a really strange social situation, right? And we saw it together, and I was like, kind of like looking at her from the corner of my eye, like, oh my God, what's coming? Because like it's sad. And then she was laughing for most of the time, like in complete denial, I think. And then the movie was over, and she's like, I like it. Like it was her life. And then a month later, she quit after like 25 years.
Wow.
And now she's married.
Cathartic
and she
experience.
sells exotic birds. And
You fixed her life.
And she dyed her hair and bought a car, and it's like she's got...
She needed it for change.
Something like that. I mean, I'm not saying that the movie changed her life like that. She, at the same time, she was like, for the first time, falling in love with somebody, and like, it was a combination of things, but for my entire family, the whole movie was very therapeutic and like so helpful. It was more than a film. It felt like it was some kind of meta experiment where things, very positive things came out of it, but there was a risk that she could have like killed herself, right? Who knows?
I think it's really interesting, that catharsis. It can come out of it. And when people have to face this and you laugh about it and you're like, oh, hold on, oh, that's really actually very tragic.
I think it's really key what you were saying about like that is coming from a place of love, because then you can always like say you're sorry, I guess, if it's honest, you know?
Yeah.
I started doing comedy when I was 17, so who knows? You know, we all make fucking weird decisions when we're 17.
Yeah.
There's no way I would start doing stand-up comedy now. Sure, I just didn't really have any other skills. It's nice to be able to, like, that's a nice thing to try and make people laugh and bring happiness, but who knows? You know, there's also a lot of pressure, isn't it? Because you're wasting, like an episode's 25 minutes and that person's going to die one day. They're not going to get that 25 minutes back. You never think that? Gosh. I don't think people should be doing rape jokes. But then I did one, so I don't. So I don't really know. But what I liked about that scene you're talking about is it's a girl making a joke about her own rape. It was written by Hannah. She writes her own character, so I can't take credit for that. And I wouldn't have written it about a girl. It's not my place. But she wrote the joke, and I think there is something nice about saying, yeah, you know, because always the narrative with rape, and for very obvious reasons, is, oh my God, this is awful, what a very sad thing that's happened. And there was something nice about, I just think, a girl like sort of owning it and saying that happened and it was fucked, but I'm still moving on with my life and I'm living. That's why I think that joke is okay and why I left it in. But I mean, it's just about not being a douchebag. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just don't. Is this just making fun of people, or is it, or are you just not? Are you just being a nice guy, or are you just being obnoxious? Larry David, Ricky Gervais, and Louis C.K. are often just being obnoxious, I think.
Right.
But sometimes they all think they're heroes. Yeah. They're assuming going in that people know that. And I've actually run into this problem in America a few times where I've assumed the other person's known that I'm very, like, left-wing and on, you know, pro sort of, like, and then the interviews come out and I've looked really like a bad guy because I've made some little jokes. I think they're also just getting a bit bored and lazy, aren't they?
I guess for me, like, I don't, I've done comedy and I've worked with, like, for instance, like, the funniest person that I've met live, I think, is Kristen Wiig, for real. Like, she's like the funniest human being that I've been around. And she has never, like, on the 2 months that we spent together, she never made fun of somebody. Like, she was never using people or somebody's pain or somebody's flaws for comedy. Like, all of her comedy came from absurdity and just, like, funny observations that nobody noticed. Like, Seinfeld is kind of similar in a way. And I find that comedy the hardest and the funniest by far to me. You know, when you are actually not harming anything. It's almost like a Buddhist sort of, like, comedy where, like, you're not really causing any harm at all. And, like, it's impressive. I really thrive in making fun of people myself, you know? And yeah, like, I laugh at people's sad life, you know?
I found it interesting that you put Michael Cera and Kristen Wiig in pieces that were quite dramatic at times, and it was great because they just played against it really well. Was there a conscious choice to do that, or
not necessarily? I had no idea who Kristen Wiig was until my friend told me that she thought that she could play a role in the movie. So yeah, I had no idea, but usually funny people are very smart, and I feel that working with smart actors is, like, really such a treat, you know? Like, they have a really huge range. But I was going to say that I feel that people start losing their brightness or their comedy when they are attempting to be funny. I feel that the attempt to be funny makes things to cease to be funny. Like, I feel that there's something that has to be casual, and that's what I was telling you. I think that you're a really funny guy, you know? Stop it. No, I really think so, but I've met so many stand-up comedians that are a complete drag. Like, you sit with them at a table and they're, like, depressed and boring or arrogant or pretentious, you know, and you're like, how come this person thinks it's funny? Like, you're not funny live. How could you be funny on stage? You know, like, I feel that comedy has to be intrinsic to your personality. You don't study comedy. You don't become a comedian. You either are funny or you're not. That's how I see comedy personally. So I feel that people trying to be funny usually fail, to me at least. Yeah.
When I was in my mid-20s, I worked for Rove for about 6 weeks. And
Oh, me too.
Did you?
Yeah.
I got fired. But
Yeah, me too.
But I tried so hard. I'd go in on my days off. But I just couldn't get it. And I kept on, and I'd watch the other writers and I'd go, okay, this is what they're doing. They're doing that. And then I would write a sketch that I thought was doing what they thought was funny. And then the head writer, who was a great guy, called me and said, Lally, this sketch you've sent us, do you think that's funny? And I said, no. And he said, well, if you don't think it's funny, no one's going to think it's funny. And he said, you might write something that's funny and it won't be right for the show. But if it doesn't come from your instincts, no one's going to like it. And that was worth the 6 weeks of working there to kind of find out. So I think in a way you just sort of have to, you check with other people and stuff afterwards. But if you think it's funny, usually somebody else will too, I think.
Yeah, I write in a cave, and years ago I used to say, oh yes, I care about my audience, and I really, try and write universal stories and have archetypes and da-da-da. And then about a year ago, after 18 years, I realised, actually, no, I don't care about the audience at all. I just write for myself. And I used to try and make my dad laugh. That was important, because he was an old bastard. But yeah, no, I really, my comedy comes actually from anger and injustice. For me to sit down and write a screenplay, I have to be really agitated and feel that there's somebody's story that needs to be told, and then the comedy comes out of the tragedy. So that's my formula.
Sebastián?
I find, I laugh at the weirdest stuff, like, for instance, but I don't know how could I put this in a show and make it funny for other people, but for instance, I've been laughing at Oprah a lot. I just find her whole figure really funny, like what she represents and the things she does, and I find her magazine to be hilarious, and she's always on the cover. That makes me laugh. And once, I was walking down New York, and there was this poster. I don't know what she was selling herself, and she was it was a big picture of her face, and she was doing this, right? So her pinky was sticking out like that, and then I'm like, what is her pinky sticking out like that? It makes no. And so I tried the position, and it's really uncomfortable, and and if you hold this position for long enough, you start hurting here. So it really made no sense, and I thought, I'm obsessed with memes. I find memes to be the biggest mystery of the world. My dream is to create a meme, a successful meme like planking or Harlem Shake. It's really my dream, more than an Oscar, anything. It's like a meme, and so I thought that could be a meme, like Oprah Pinky, and I consulted with my friend Michael Cera, and then he's like, yeah, that's kind of funny. It's weird that she's doing that. Let's try to make that into a meme, right? And we bought a website called oprahpinky.com. And then we started asking people to take pictures of themselves doing this. And then we would juxtapose it with Oprah, and then it didn't pick up at all. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody gave one shit, and we had only 25 people doing it. And then I find that funny. I find that she's doing that in the picture. I find that really funny. Is that, I don't know if it's funny really.
I find it funny.
Yeah, right, it's funny, yeah. But it's funny if you stop and talk about it for a long time, like we have right now. If you talk about her pinky for an hour straight, it's it becomes hilarious.
And Josh, your barometer, I think was the question.
What was that? Well, there's a tension, one of the things I don't like about stand-up comedy is you always have to be talking about things that everyone in the audience can identify with really quickly, and they have to be on board, and you have to keep going. For me, that was always kind of personal stories, but often that's why stand-up comedy has so many tropes, because the amount of incredibly universal experiences that there just aren't that many. You need absolutely everybody on board for it to work in the room. When you make a television show with a narrative, people can miss some jokes because they've not seen that particular Disney movie, and it's okay. But I think as a matter of comedy taste goes, yeah, I just make what I would like, and then assume that people will find it, because you don't like I think bad reviews, they are properly irrelevant, because somebody not liking the show, it doesn't matter, because it's not for you, right? You can go and watch anything else in the world. You make the entertainment for people that are watching it. So I assume if I like it, there'll be some other people that like it, and the people that don't like it can watch Cupcake Wars. Or
Yes.
I think that is it. And for me, as a director, I find often there's times when I just won't get something. And if there's a project I don't get, I will not direct it. Just, that's wrong to try, unless it's a big challenge or something like that I have to. But I think you have to identify with it, otherwise it's dead. You can't give the best of your work to that person. And I'm dark. I like to go to a very dark place. So it's sometimes, but sometimes you find that, you know, what you thought was not going to be funny is a huge hit. And that's always disappointing when you go, I thought that was a bag of shit. But, you know, so it is, the barometer can be wrong, you know. It's a tough one. Because sometimes you can't see other people's comedy. And
you can't, like, you can't really use a litmus test of, like, because you don't, for comedy to be actually really good, you want it to be something that people haven't seen. Like, it needs to be new. For a joke to be funny, you have to have not heard it. So often you have to do things that you can't look at something else that worked and go, like, this will work because they did it. Because hopefully you're doing something that you can't find somebody else doing it. Yep. And that's challenging.
I think that's us for time. So thank you to our panelists this evening.
Oh, thank you.
Afternoon, I should say.